All right, this is my fourth time of trying to record this video. My voice is terrible. I'm sick. I'm just going to try and get through it. We're going to push through. It is what it is. I'm just not going to sugarcoat anything. We're going to get straight to the point. It's going to be very unlike Fanny, but we're going to talk about booster boxes today. Specifically, the graphs that we're looking at are Sword and Shield related, and I wanted to do Sword and Shield related because all the Sword and Shield sets got reprinted. They got reprinted. Some of them got reprinted multiple times. Evolving Skies, for example, had like 4 print runs. I don't know if you were around during that time, but there were like 4 print runs of Evolving Skies. There was one point in time at the end of 2021. No, I've prefaced it in videos before. But booster boxes for Evolving Skies hit under $100 at one point in time. Not too long after release. It was about 4 months after release, 4 or 5 months after release. We got overloaded with product. There was Darkness Ablaze booster boxes that got reprinted, Vivid Voltage booster boxes that got reprinted, Battle Styles, an additional wave of Chilling Reign. We were right ahead, right before the release of Fusion Strike, and we had multiple waves of celebrations all coming out, all at the same time. Fast forward, we're a completely different area right now. Completely different. Everything is different, right? The time is different. The market is different to an extent. There's still cyclical things that are happening that are very similar to what happened during the pandemic. We ran through a time during really the release of Shining Fates, not too long after Vivid Voltage came out, where you could not find product on the shelves at all. There were people lining up at Targets, at Walmarts to buy out. I mean, there were fights breaking out. It was terrible. Just like what you see now on the drama channels and things like that. You see the same thing now. It's very cyclical. People racing home to sell on Rip and Ships on Whatnot, and Whatnot was a lot newer back then than what it is now, or sell on Facebook Marketplace. Scalpers just taking advantage of the situation. This is why we try all the time to preach don't FOMO. And if you're somebody who wants to invest and you want to see your Pokemon cards appreciate over time, that's fine. Booster boxes are still going to do fine, and the proof is in the pudding right here. We're going to talk about it in Sword and Shield, but there will be additional print runs that will bring booster box prices down. Now, there's a lot of misinformation that's going around right now. We don't know exactly what sets are going to get reprinted. We have a good idea. There's been a lot of rumors out there about Paldea Evolve booster boxes, which is a little bit interesting. It's still going to be in rotation for a while, but it did get reprinted a decent amount. Obsidian Flames booster boxes getting reprinted, which makes a little bit more sense because we didn't have a giant print run, a giant second print run of Obsidian Flames, and that will be around for a while. Maybe more Paldean Fates booster bundles, not necessarily the trainer boxes, but booster bundles, which we expected to get more Paldean Fates products of some sort. And then booster boxes for sets like Surging Sparks, Twilight Masquerade, and even Journey Together, which hasn't released yet. Journey Together doesn't release until the end of the month, and they're already talking about reprinting it. There's been reps who are at big conventions and places like that have already mentioned, hey, Journey Together is going to get additional print runs and things like that. Now, once I finalize details and I can give you actual pertinent information, I will obviously spread that information to you guys so you can make the best decision when it comes to spending your collection dollars. But this is why it's very important not to FOMO, not to lose your minds or anything like that. Sealed product is going to appreciate because you cannot go back to a sealed product after it has been opened. That's really the big thing. And the whole idea of Pokemon card investing is here to stay. We talked about this in a previous video. For a long time, when Pokemon originally started, it was a game that was targeted around just that, the game aspect of things, playing the card game. The first advertisements or advertisements, if you watch the first commercials of the Pokemon trading card game, it's all about going to the schoolyard and battling your Pokemon card against a friend's Pokemon card, and that's what they used for target audience. They used that for their marketing ploy, and then eventually collectors started getting into things, and all of a sudden Pokemon kind of shifted a little bit to more of this collecting idea. But collectors, it took a while for players to get used to that. It took a while for players to get used to the idea of collectors kind of infringing on their territory, and then it became okay for years and years and years. Now we're kind of like, things change, times change. They say every like 4 years, 7 years, something like that. The information that you learned 7 years ago is no longer relevant, and it's completely different information now. That's why, like college, if you go back to a college degree, say you graduated 7 years ago, what you would learn today is not what you would have learned 7 years ago, because things change, and the economy changes, and society changes, and mindsets change, and it all changes over time. So Journey Together coming out and getting reprinted, I mean, that's a very real possibility, because now you're looking at an additional branch, an additional niche of the Pokemon state in this whole investing realm that is starting to become a little bit more accepted, starting to become a little bit more understood. And really, it's more just like the scalping is an issue. The buying out big box stores and then reselling on the secondary market immediately, flipping, retail arbitrage. Like that's, I think, kind of what makes a lot of people upset, frustrated, because you go into Target, Walmart, and you expect to find product at MSRP, and then everything's selling above MSRP right now. But there is help coming. We just don't know exactly how much. And is it going to be enough to really damage the market? I don't know. And it has been in the past, but it's, again, completely different now. But this is why it's so important not to FOMO. Reprints will hurt the market value, but not necessarily for the long haul. It's really just more like a stumbling block. It's really more just like a speed bump in growth. And we're going to take a look at the graphs for Sword and Shield so you can kind of get a better understanding. Sword and Shield did go through at least one reprint run. Not a big one, but Sword and Shield base, Rebel Clash, they were kind of like Pokemon hype. They came out at a time where Pokemon really wasn't, like, it was the new start of the Sword and Shield generation. We had just gotten rid of the Sun and Moon generation. We moved into the Sword and Shield. The only really big difference with Sword and Shield is that they introduced Rainbow Rare trainers, which weren't really loved by a whole lot of people. But still, if you look at investing or you look at collecting and you look at what's going on in the market, Sword and Shield base is doing extremely well. You're looking at 31% growth over the past year. In March of 2024, it was sitting at 263.54, and it's jumped up to 361.40 at a high point a couple weeks ago. Now, it does look like it got bought out a little bit, and there's a lot of these that look a little bit interesting when it comes to buyouts and manipulation, things like that. You might see some new established market prices, which is going to be a little bit weird, but even now sitting at 352.44 and continuing to climb, very, very interesting. Then you've got a set like Rebel Clash, which is still doing okay. It did decrease a little bit for the first half of 2024. You can see in June of 2024, it was down to 214.41, still up about 7%, 8%, which isn't bad. It also did go through a brief period of time where it did get kind of bought out in December, a little bit earlier than what we saw with Sword and Shield base, where it jumped all the way up to about $243. Now it's sitting at $243.86. So it jumped all the way up there recently. That is high point. But you can see in December, selling between 16 and 18 boxes on a weekly basis, when normally it sells between 2 and 4. A little bit of an anomaly right there. Darkness Ablaze, which did go through an additional print run. Obviously, that print run happened in 2021, like what we were talking about before, with all these releases that kind of got sandwiched together, all these reprints, because there was so much difficulties for the average consumer to be able to get Pokemon. We try our best to make sure that we can provide Pokemon cards at MSRP, and I know a lot of other places don't do that. And like, no, I'm not going to pat myself on the back or anything like that. That's just what I like to do. That's just what I believe in doing. I believe it's the ethical thing. I believe it's the moral thing, and I stand by that. Like that's what this is all about for me. But all this talk about like GameStop charging above MSRP or Walmart charging above MSRP, they're going to do what's best for their business. That's what they're going to do. It's difficult to reach every single customer because you can't sit by your phone all the time. If you're somebody who works, a 9-to-5 job or even a job at night, it's difficult for you to stay glued to your phone all the time. Maybe you have a job where you can't sit. Like we'll keep people updated through YouTube, through socials, through Discord. But if you can't stay on your phone, you could miss out, in a second. It gets very, very frustrating. So having enough product that gets out there to make sure, like that's Pokemon's goal right now, is to get enough product out there that they can hit the average consumer, the people who work, that don't have access, that can't follow around for restocks, things like that, is making sure that they can hit that. And the only way that they can do that is to reprint a mass amount of several different sets. So if you're talking about Paldea Evolved and Obsidian Flames and Surging Sparks and Paldean Fates and Twilight Masquerade and Journey together, and having it all come out within the same month and a half, you are going to see market prices impacted. Now, it might not be, Surging Sparks dropping below MSRP. It might be Obsidian Flames falling back down to 110, or Paldea Evolved falling back down to 160, 170. That might be the best. The other thing, too, the other caveat that you have to throw into it is you don't know what it looks like from distribution. Is distribution going to charge original wholesale pricing on this? Are they going to limit every single account? Because that's what they have to do in the past, because they're overwhelmed with the amount of accounts and with the amount of ordering. Is demand going to be so high that even a large supply reprint of a lot of these products, is it going to satisfy that? That's what we're going to find out. We're going to talk more about as we get allocation numbers and we get a little bit better understanding of the super premium collection from Prismatic Evolution, because I did find out exactly how many are getting printed or allocated to distribution compared to other UPCs. It'll be very interesting to see how the product lines unfold moving forward. But Darkness Ablaze, again, again, another product that had multiple print runs, still doing very well. Now, Pokemon, very cyclical, and that's something that's really, really important to remember. This was really flat for a long time. You can see March of 2024 was actually trending downward. You can see it hit 137.31, kind of leveled off a little bit. In December of 2024, it basically hit MSRP at that point. So it took a few years to get back to that point. And the only reason it jumped well above that point is because we had this giant resurgence of Pokemon that happened right after the release of Surging Sparks. So a set like Darkness Ablaze, not doing too well historically over the past couple months, but because it is a cyclical thing, and because we do have a lot of big sets that are coming out within the next year, including the 30th anniversary, it will be very interesting, and some people are going to get burned, and that's why it's so important to be very, very careful with not spending more than you can afford to lose. Like, you have to be very, very careful when it comes into collecting Pokemon cards or investing in Pokemon cards or anything like that. Make sure you make the best decision for yourself. This jumped up to 198.63 recently, up about 30%, sitting at 195.87 currently. Battle Styles went through a couple print runs, and again, another set. Like, you're looking at a few years after release before it even hit MSRP. In March of 2024, it was sitting at 108.47. You could get it for MSRP on Pokemon Center's website up until a few weeks ago, and then started taking off a little bit. Again, a couple of situations where all of a sudden out of nowhere it started to sell 40 to 50 boxes on a weekly basis as opposed to the 15 to 20 that it normally sells. So a little weird stuff going on, but up about 63% over the past year, sitting at 177.87 currently and continue to climb. Chilling Reign has backed off a little bit, but it wouldn't surprise me again if you see it jump up, because you see an anomaly here. You see back in March of 2024, all of a sudden almost 100 boxes sold on a weekly basis. Then it started leveling out a little bit. Now what happened over the past couple weeks? Well, you have another situation where 80 boxes sold. Well, the amount that it normally sells is 10 to 20. So all of a sudden you see all these getting bought out that are close to the market price, and a new market price is going to be established, especially with this demand that is still there. Lack of supply means higher price points, and it continues to climb. So it's up about 77% on the year. It was at 171.95 back in March of 2024. Now it's sitting at 304.87. So it's down a little bit from its one-year high, but it wouldn't surprise me if you saw it back at that price point very, very soon. Evolving Skies kind of doing the same thing. Not as easy to manipulate a set like Evolving Skies because it is so expensive already. You do see some situations where there's a couple weeks where 25 to 30 boxes sold, which is a little bit different than what it normally sells, usually 15 to 20. So not like a huge amount above the norm. In July of 2024, this was sitting at 638.56 and continuing to climb. A lot of people ask, what's the Evolving Skies set of the Scarlet and Violet generation? I don't think there is one. I don't think you can compare anything to something like Evolving Skies. The closest would probably be Prismatic Evolutions, right? Like, you would think that, but that's a specialty set. That's not even a booster box set. Like, that's not even a main series set. So I don't think you can really, the demand that happened with Evolving Skies is just like something we've never really experienced before. It did jump up to $1,382.48 recently. It's currently sitting at $1,314.83 right now. Again, up about 106% on the year, doing extremely well. Then we've got, this is Brilliant Stars right here. In March of 2024, this is supposed to be Fusion Strike right here. Fusion Strike in beginning of December. The 3-month graph worked. I don't know, TCG Player has been doing a lot of weird updates, but I wanted to make sure to highlight Fusion Strike. So ignore the Evolving Skies picture because it's another situation where you see a buyout happening, a buyout going on. In December, this was out of $290.02 for the booster box. It did jump up to about $490. That was at the end of December. But if you look at the normal sales pattern, it's selling between 5 and 10. Sometimes you'll see 20 booster boxes on a weekly basis. Well, then all of a sudden, end of February, you have a day or a week where it sells between 60 and 70. And if you look at the last sales, it was really the end of February where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's just selling a ton of booster boxes all on the same day. So obviously an organized buyout or manipulation of some point. And because of that, we might see a new price set for Fusion Strike. It's currently sitting at 430.18, obviously a little bit off, about 15% off of its one-year high or 3-month high. You might see it get back up to that point real quick. Here's Brilliant Stars. This one did get reprinted a couple times as well. In March of 2024, it was sitting at 157.14. You can see relatively flat again all the way up until December of 2024. And like everything else, like all those singles that we talk about in the market really started taking off at that point. Jumped all the way up to 291.61. It's leveled off a little bit. It's sitting at 286.26, but up about 81% on the year, doing extremely well. Astral Radiance. This one did get bought out a little bit in March, but you can see that's kind of around the time where Astral Radiance started to go out of stock on the Pokemon Center website. I believe it did get replenished at one point in time, and that's why it leveled off quite a bit, right around that $160 price point, and then took the next step forward. You can see taking the next step forward in December, like a lot of these other products. Now it's currently sitting at a one-year high at $237.15 and continuing to grow. Lost Origin has retraced a little bit, but again, you can see where that sharp price increase happened was right after a buyout occurred, where all of a sudden out of nowhere, you've got between 100 and 120 booster boxes that sold on a weekly basis, as opposed to the norm, which is right around 20 to 30 booster boxes. So in March of 2024, it was sitting at $159.90, relatively flat up until November, then got bought out and jumped up in price to that one-year high of $386.51. Now it's retraced a little bit at $337.33, but still up about 111% on the year. Here's Silver Tempest, the last main series set of the Sword and Shield block. Definitely getting bought out a little bit more recently. You can see 80 sales happening over the past couple weeks, as opposed to the normal 30 to 40 that have been happening over the past couple months. In March of 2024, it was sitting at $133.90, jumped up to about $160 in June and stayed relatively flat up until December. Then, like a lot of these other sets, just kind of blew up. It jumped up to $243.56, sitting at $233.50 right now, so up about 71%. But you might see a new price established because, again, went through another situation where these buyouts occurred. Here's Champion's Path, which has retraced the majority of the year. You can see in December of 2024, it was at $95. Not a whole lot of excitement in Champion's Path. You do have a couple of cards that are obviously chases, like that Charizard right there, but this one has been at $95 really since release. Like, they put this in multiple waves because it was so popular, and it was scalped a lot, but it's really just enough supply has met demand, and because it hasn't been a set that a lot of people have really loved opening, it stayed really close to that $95 price point really since release. Now, it did jump up recently to $118.33, so it is up about 12% on the year, but definitely not where you would expect it to be when you think about how Champion's Path kind of entered the market. Here's Shining Fates right here. This one has done really well over the past couple months, but that's because there really just hasn't been a whole lot of product available. So a lot of people have transitioned to Shining Fates, much like what we'll see with Pokemon Go. A little bit of a weird anomaly there in December, where all of a sudden it sold between 120 and 140 boxes for a week, where normally it sells between 40 and 60. In June of 2024, this was still selling below MSRP, despite being a few years old. It was selling for $42.87. Then started increasing really in November and December, like what we've seen from a lot of these other sealed products as well. $75.31 was its high point, which it hit recently. Now it's down to $73.59, up about 63.5%. Pokemon Go, again, just no availability for other products, so people transitioning over to Pokemon Go, and you can see the demand kind of hit where it's selling about 20 to 30 per week now. It did have 1 week period where it sold between 50 and 60, but that's probably because there just wasn't any other product to get, so people were like, hey, I guess I'll just take Pokemon Go because that's all that's left. In June of 2024, it was selling for about $13 under MSRP. December started blowing up. It's up to $69.02 right now, up about 71.5% on the year. And then Celebrations, the second to last set that we're going to look at, in March of 2024, it was sitting at $71.18. Then again, demand hit in December right after the release of Surging Sparks, jumped all the way up. Now it's sitting at $121.76 and continuing to climb. Obviously, the 25th anniversary set. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with this one over the next year, especially as we run into the 30th anniversary next year. And then Crown Zenith is just a set that everybody's going to love for a really long time. Great pull rates, beautiful artworks, a lot of Crown Zenith out there. There's been a lot of Crown Zenith that has been printed, multiple print runs of multiple different products, but in March of 2024, it was selling for $41.95. Even in July, it was still selling for about $50, and you can see a decent amount of sales on a weekly basis. A couple of periods of time where it did sell a little bit more than normal, but even now, November, December, January, you can see between 60 and 80 units moving on a weekly basis, which is still a strong amount and not too far off of those weird numbers that we talk about. So it's up to $73.45 currently, up about 73.5% on the year. So I will give you more information when it comes to all these reprints and restocks when I get them. Obviously, we'll talk about the super premium collection. Hopefully, I'll have the final information on that on Friday. I may not have my allocation numbers, but we'll be able to compare it to some of the other ultra premium collections and give you an idea for what's being out there. But the most important thing to do is to not overspend. If you're somebody who's like, I'm not paying above MSRP, stick to your gut, stick to what is best for your collection dollars, because that's what's going to keep you in the hobby, and that's what's going to keep you enjoying the hobby. If you're out there spending $250 on a Surging Sparks booster box, and all of a sudden it gets reprinted and it falls below MSRP down to 150, like you're going to get upset. And that's the last thing that we want. So make the best decisions when it comes to spending your collection dollars. And if you miss out, that's okay, because there's going to be a lot of other great stuff that comes in the future. I apologize so much for the way that I sound. Hopefully I'll be able to get some rest and come back better than ever for our stream on Wednesday. But I love you guys. We'll be back on Wednesday with a stream, Thursday with a video. Until next time, guys. Peace.